Greetings, dear listener. Subscribe to the channel so as not to miss new scary stories and support me with a like. Enjoy listening.
The old sedan was slowly dragging along a country road, its suspension creaking. The car was clearly not suitable for country trips, especially winter ones. Sitting behind the wheel was Roman, a 16-year-old boy who frowned and blinked frequently, squeezing the steering wheel until his fingers turned white. He didn't have a license. His driving experience was limited to 3 laps in the parking lot, but after the words "What's wrong?" press the pedal and turn the steering wheel. It's an automatic. You don't need a lot of intelligence. It's not far. He agreed to drive to the neighboring village. However, given the circumstances, there was really no one to steer except him. In the passenger seat, lounging heavily, Gleb, Roma's father, was snoring drunkenly. And behind, buried in a book, sat Yana, Gleb's young wife. As you know, the day of the funeral is not chosen. And if not for this sad event, the family would not have left the city into the wilderness in such weather. But Gleb's brother froze to death in the forest, and relatives from all over the area gathered to say goodbye to him. On the first day we gathered at our parents' house, they drank so much that no one could stand on their feet. And the next morning, when many had already left, it was decided to continue communication only in the house of the deceased. In the neighboring village, Gleb gave in some more. He and his father cried, and then Yana and Roma loaded the drunken man into the car. The girl flatly refused to lead, although she was sober. The last argument for the boy was, "Why aren't you a man? You can't tell a Mashna story," sarcastically thrown by the grandfather. The old Japanese woman slowly drove out onto the road towards the highway. There, the third turn, near the old tracks. There is a crook tree there. You won't get lost. The grandfather waved his hand. The day turned out to be gloomy and devoid of color. It was as if the sky was about to unleash its wrath on the snow-covered fields. Time skipped past noon when the car stopped on the side of the road at the turn off the highway. Roma looked around. Here's the tree. As for the old paths, everything around was covered up to such an extent that you would have to wait until spring to understand where they are. The boy tapped his fingers on the steering wheel, sighed, and took out his phone. There was almost no connection, but the map somehow loaded. Roma put tags and put the phone away. During this time, the sky seemed to frown even more, and a light snow began to fall. The wheels entered a shallow rut hidden under the snow, and slightly descending from the road, the car creaked and rolled towards the copse. Snowdrifts piled up in hills around. The bare black trunks of sleeping trees now approached and then moved away. The snow began to fall heavier, and the wind rose. To Roma, this meandering between islands of forest and uneven terrain seemed endless. The rut sometimes became deeper. Then the stones, hidden by a blanket of snow, scratched the bottom with an unpleasant sound. Visibility was not very good. Snow stuck to the windshield, and soon the wipers stopped working. A whole snowdrift formed on both sides, and at some point the rubber strips simply got stuck. Outside, meanwhile, there was a restless hum and howl. The wind raged, raising heaps of snowflakes from the fields. "Rum, what's there? Will we get there soon?" Yana stirred, drying out her words sadly. "They said 10 kilometers in total. What's your navigator?" The guy stopped the car and took the phone. Indeed, judging by the sensations, we had been driving for an eternity, and the village still had not appeared. Imagine Roma's surprise when he realized that the mark had not moved at all on the map from the place where they turned off the road. He tapped his finger on the phone in surprise and tried to advance the card, but the device did not respond. The navigator is frozen. The connection got really bad, and the weather outside became completely disgusting. The wind moaned, and the branches of the trees swayed, stretching out their black fingers into the gloomy leaden heights. The driver just sighed. "I don't know. This village of yours should have appeared a long time ago. Why the hell did Gleb get so drunk?" The guy muttered. "Well, don't be rude about your father." The girl responded dissatisfied, but then softened. "He's in grief." Roma snorted and pulled on his hat, then put on his mittens. "I need to clean the glass." The guy got out of the car, looking around sadly. The frost instantly hit my cheeks and crawled under my collar. At such moments, far from being a villager, Roma was incredibly glad that his father preferred working in the city to gardening, fun, and fishing. If he had to survive in such wild places instead of calmly walking along cleared streets, the guy would probably howl. A person here has no advantages even if you are an experienced hunter who has walked many trails. One day something may prevent you from returning home. This is what happened to his father's brother. This thought made me feel completely uneasy. I wanted to get back into the car as soon as possible. The guy walked around the car and took a scraper and brush out of the trunk. When his father first brought Yana, who was only 9 years older than his son, into the house, Roma swore to himself that he would never be friends with her. My soul was empty after the death of my mother. And less than a year has passed since Gleb started a new relationship. Roma remained silent, started riots, snorted, and refused to eat what the girl cooked. Gleb worked a lot and did not particularly notice this little war in his own home. And maybe this would have continued to this day. But one day Roma brought home a dog. The bald, mangy puppy was sick. The boy cried, begging his father to help him. Gleb flatly refused and raised a cry. But then Yana raised her voice for the first time. She stood up for the small trembling lump in the arms of the howling boy. And that evening a thin thread of mutual understanding stretched between them. Roma did not consider Yana a replacement for his mother, but since then he stopped fighting against her. Sometimes it happened that one glance was enough for these two to come to a silent agreement. Yana got out of the car and stretched to the sides, looking around. The wind made me squint. Roma sniffed, peeling off the wiper rubber, clearing it of snow. He gave the girl one single glance, and she understood that there was no point in interfering. Instead, she walked a little further down the road. It was still quite possible to drive ahead. On the left hand there were trees, and uneven beds going up the hill, and on the right there was a white clearing, crookedly abutting the black line of the forest, the distance of which was difficult to see because of the windblower. The frost danced across the open snow-covered plain, like a devil on a tablecloth, but in reality, the field only seemed flat. There were several potholes extending from the road, which walked along the ground, hiding under the snow. One could go blind from all this whiteness. Yana shivered, wrapping the scarf around her neck tighter, took out her gloves and quickly pulled them on. She had already turned to return to the car when, out of the corner of her eye, she caught some movement in a pothole near the road. Something dark seemed to appear in the middle of the snow. The girl made a visor over her eyes, with her palms, and took a closer look. In the very next moment she almost suffocated from behind a snowdrift. A small child's face, framed by dark hair dusted with snow, looked at her. Her heart sank heavily in her chest. Yana opened her mouth and blinked, trying to drive away the vision. But it didn't disappear. The face was still there. Moreover, the head on the thin neck twitched slightly and poked out more strongly from behind the snowdrift. The thoughts in the girl's head were spinning at breakneck speed. How was this even possible? But she quickly stepped out of the way in that direction, instinctively. If someone really threw a child into the snow, he needed urgent help. Many questions were on the tip of my tongue, but were never asked. The snow in the pothole was knee-deep, and Yana took a sharp breath, falling through, but managed to stay on her feet. Behind me I could hear the sound of a plastic cleaner hitting the windshield and Roma's indistinct muttering. But Yana seemed to find herself on the other side of reality. Not believing her eyes and wanting to make sure, the girl extended her hands to the child, who obviously was completely undressed. Small shoulders, blue from the cold, also appeared from behind the snowdrift. But Yana froze, without throwing the snow aside. Unpleasant goosebumps rushed through her body. Something was wrong. The dark-haired head slowly looked up. It was turned back in relation to the body. The eyes looked black and merciless. Before Yana could recoil, the creature jerked towards the outstretched arm and sank its teeth into the skin between the glove and sleeve. The girl felt a sharp pain, and it was as if something icy rushed from her wrist to her shoulder. Yana screamed and, grabbing the snow-dusted hair on her little bluish head, tore the child away from her, threw her away, and rushed back. A quiet growl was heard, causing consciousness to become even more confused. She didn't even notice how she found herself near the car. The clap of the trunk being closed brought the girl back to reality, and then Roma appeared. "What are you doing? Are you cold? Sit down," he said gloomily, opening the front door. Yana was breathing quickly. Her heart was fluttering like a bird in a cage. "Roma, I was bitten by some kind of crab." Her voice broke into a hysterical hoarse. "Roma, look, look, there's a dead child there." The girl felt that she was shaking. She did not find the strength to turn in that direction. She simply squeezed the bite side and looked at her stepson with huge eyes. What? The guy moved away from the door and approached the girl. What kind of dead child? Look, he bit me. Yana raised her hand in front of Roma and pulled back her sleeve. There were no marks on the trembling limb. The guy examined the hand given to him from all sides under the uncomprehending gaze of the girl, who nevertheless turned around. On the snow near the road there was snow that had been stirred up by it, but there were no other traces. He was there. Yana looked at Roma again, but abruptly fell silent under his wary, condemning gaze. The guy couldn't understand what kind of joke these were. The timing for this was very unfortunate. He was tired of being nervous, and I'm just tired. In the end, Yana silently got into the car and drove on. The road ran along the hill and then turned left, skirting it. Roma tapped the navigator, sighing. The phone seemed to be frozen. Not only did the car not move, but the device even moved, refused to boot. The guy decided that the most important thing now was to get there, and since there was only one road, you could just crawl forward. My father was still snoring, his head tilted to the side. Roma suddenly felt uncomfortable about this. It would have been much better if he hadn't slept. Yana also became quiet and obviously lay down on the seat and did not flash in the rearview mirror. If not for this situation, the guy might even have been able to enjoy the trip. The landscapes outside the windows were almost idyllic to watch from the outside. Snowy plains, streaks of black trikes, fireworks, displays of snowflakes swirling under a heavy sky. But Roma felt responsible. He was driving on an unfamiliar road, which meant there was no way to relax. The car carefully entered the turn and drove on. Roma saw that the road ahead seemed to dissolve under the snow crust, which gradually grew in front of the travelers. And again there was a field on the right hand. This time it seemed to rest against the gray wall of the storm. It was completely impossible to see where it ended. Only in the middle was something dark, like some kind of building. Have we really arrived? In Roma's head, this "we've arrived" sounded like a sentence. Of course, you could turn around and go back. It's okay, the guy didn't mind listening to his father's reproaches, but wandering around in unfamiliar places when the day was already approaching evening, as he reasoned, was completely unreasonable. Roma slowed down, let go of the steering wheel, and exhaled. He turned to his father and pushed him on the shoulder. "Wake up, Dad. Stop sleeping," he said sternly, trying not to show alarm in his voice. "Father," the guy pushed again. The man didn't react at all. His chest rose and fell rhythmically. Roma looked back. Yana was also silent, wrapped in a sheepskin coat, lying with her back to the driver's seat. For a moment, the guy felt alone in the middle of a snowy desert. Anxiety washed over him like an icy wave, making him shudder. "So, I don't know, as you wish, but I'm turning back and we're going back. There's no passage here." Roma said this calmly and confidently, although of course he was nervous in his heart. The sleepers answered him with silence, and the guy cleared his throat, changed gear, and took the wheel. The car gurgled and stalled. Roma turned the key. The instrument panel blinked lazily and went dark. He turned again. There was an indistinct hum from the car. The panel blinked again and went out. "Damn you." The guy couldn't stand it and slammed his palms on the steering wheel. He screamed deliberately loudly, hoping that there would be at least some reaction from the sleeping people. But she was not there. Roma angrily hit the door, throwing it open, and a whole heap of snowflakes flew into the cabin. The guy jumped outside and walked back and forth to cool off. Not only are you stuck on an unknown road in the middle of the forest, but you won't even be able to wake up the adults. Yes, now Roma felt like a stupid child, unable to solve the problem, and this irritated him incredibly. Something had to be done, at least something. The guy opened the hood and looked in. There was a breath of warmth from the inside of the machine, but the rushing wind struck with renewed force, as if taking it away for itself. Everything, to the last drop. Roma swore quietly, raised his collar, and put his hands in his pockets. He was never able to figure out what exactly went wrong, and even if I could, what could be done in such circumstances? It would be very helpful if a village appeared. The guy couldn't understand where he had gone on the only road to get lost. And then an idea came to his mind: a telephone. You could call someone. You don't have to do it alone. This thought pushed him to the door. The guy jumped into the driver's seat and grabbed the device. He was still hanging with the map on the screen. Roma tapped it on the steering wheel. Dad, Gleb, wake up. We're broken. Give me your phone. Mine is somehow faulty." Roma shoved his father in the shoulder, prying off the cover of the smartphone with his fingernail. He took out the battery and the screen finally went dark, but the phone refused to turn on. "Damn you," the guy growled, turning to his father. "Gleb." His voice sounded demanding and loud. However, the man sleeping next to him didn't even wince. "Yana, give me your..." Roma turned around, intending to wake up the sleeping girl, but she was not in the back seat. The guy shuddered, feeling panic creeping in. He even touched the seat with his hand. And then I completely forgot about the phone. The guy jumped out of the car, slamming the door. The blizzard hummed and moaned. The sky became darker. The short winter day was coming to an end. "Yana!" Roma yelled, looking around, putting his hands to his face. "Yana!" He ran back a little, gasping, cleared his throat as snow flew into his throat. And when I turned around, I saw a staggering figure on the white blanket of the field. How did she manage to move so far? "Yana!" Roma ran forward through the snowdrifts, constantly shouting his name. She didn't respond. The wind howled, carrying the sounds of a living voice into the gray darkness. Roma rushed past the car and crashed into a snowdrift, jumping along the tracks left by the girl. Roma was in a hurry, exhausted and cold, but Yana continued to go where the wind seemed to laugh, spinning icy whirlwinds, walking the sharp edges of snowflakes across the guy's flushed cheeks. It seemed to him that he was wallowing in flour. There was no way he could catch up or reach out. Roma turned around several times. Maybe Gleb had finally woken up, but he only saw the open hood behind a snowdrift. The guy rushed after Yana again, but tripped and fell, burying himself deep in the snow. My face and hands were burned. Groaning painfully, Roma stood up, picking up the hat that had fallen in the snow, but did not put it on his head. "Yana, stop!" he shouted almost pitifully. I had to run further, under the howling of the wind, which seemed to deliberately interfere with the clumsy boy. But soon it became easier to run. The snowdrift began to lower. Roma realized that he was catching up with Yana and pressed on, not paying attention to the pain and cold. It became clear what kind of building was visible in the middle of the snow field. It was an old well. More precisely, what is left of him. "Stop!" Roma grabbed the girl by the hood of her sheepskin coat and pulled her towards him, causing her to almost fall back. "Where did you go? Are you crazy?" Roma did not let go of her hood, trying to turn Yana towards himself. "You're a fool, you'll freeze. Where did you go?" Roma finally looked into the girl's face, but immediately pulled back, falling on his butt and swallowing snow again. Her face was distorted with a grimace of terrible hatred, and her eyes rolled back so that only the whites were visible. The girl staggered, bared her teeth, and waved her hand at Roma. What he saw was so strange and incomprehensible that Roma widened his eyes and froze, watching. All thoughts jumped out of his head at once, and Yana turned to the well and, staggering, moved towards it again. It was as if the wind had decided to steal Roma's last breath. He became more and more furious. "Stop," the guy almost whispered, getting up with difficulty. Yana was clearly not herself. And was it Yana? When a cyanotic baby clumsily tumbled out of the dark interior of the well onto the side of the well, Roma was dumbfounded. The wind blew his black hair up so that it looked like thorns, and his gaze penetrated with unbearable ruthlessness. The child's head was twisted back. He had only one leg, and he moved unpretentiously, but quickly, turning his little arms back. The unknown man opened his mouth and nodded quickly, as if calling. Yana slowly walked towards him, staggering, as if she had no strength left. Dead child. So it was true. Roma had a hunch, but what's the point? The small monster looked so bloodthirsty, as if it was about to rush at Yana. Fury filled the guy's consciousness with a hot wave and instantly gave him strength. "Well, leave her," he yelled, rushing towards the girl. With all the strength he had, he pulled Yana's hood, throwing her to the side into a snowdrift. Then the child growled, chattering his teeth, and clumsily fell from the well into the snow, spun there, and sprang straight at Roma. The guy almost jumped away from fear. He put his hands forward, hit the baby with his hat, and he flew to the side. Yana, meanwhile, rolled onto her side and, helping herself with her hands, crawled to the well. The little freak, scattering snow around him, spun like a top and growled, chattering his teeth, and then rushed at the guy again. But he was already ready, and again repelled his attack with his hat. If Yana said that she was bitten, then she shouldn't let the creature get close to her. "You can't let him in." Thoughts danced in Roma's head. He couldn't feel his hands. He looked straight into the face of the black-haired child, who, after the second unsuccessful attempt to attack, seemed to have become even angrier. Roma stepped to the side and back, trying to move the monster away from Yana. The child twisted his arms with incredible speed, floundering in the snow. He rushed a third time. Roma waved his hat, but the freak grabbed it with his teeth, squealing like a wounded animal. It sounded so eerie in the howl of the wind that the guy almost dropped his hat. The baby hung on her, squirming, and Roma screamed, trying to shake him off, and almost fell. In all this nightmare, the guy completely lost sight of Yana. The girl crawled to the well and then stood up, clinging to the sides. The child let go of his hat with a squeal and fell into the snow. Roma flew into a snowdrift, but stayed on his feet. And then, out of the corner of my eye, I noticed movement at the well. No, he yelled when he saw Yana's legs disappear into the darkness. Roma's furious gaze darted towards the little monster, but he looked from the snowdrift and smiled, not trying to attack anymore. And then the baby disappeared in a gust of wind. The guy was doused with snowflakes, so that when he blinked, there was no one in the snowdrift. And at that very moment the storm ceased. It became so quiet that Roma thought he had gone deaf. But then the guy realized that he could hear his ragged breathing and the wild pounding of blood in his temples. In the dead gray silence, snowflakes descended on the snowy field, whirling. Roma stood alone near the well. The guy walked up to the wooden structure on stiff legs and looked into its interior. His gaze was met by impenetrable blackness. Yana, whispered Roma. Tears flowed down his frozen cheeks, and his legs could barely support the exhausted guy. He leaned on the dark log of the well, trying to see something in the blackness. How to get it? What to do? What kind of freak was this? From powerlessness and pain, Roma threw back his head and screamed. A scream burst from him, giving the last warmth to the indifferent heavy sky. The scream stopped, and now openly sobbing, the guy slid into the snow. When, a few moments later, smoke wafted from somewhere, the guy froze, not believing his feelings. He inhaled sharply, then again and again, quickly wiping his eyes, squinting. At dusk, a little further away, where previously only a white veil had been visible, the outlines of a village appeared. Roma couldn't believe his eyes, but smoky curls clearly rose above the houses. The windows glowed invitingly and warmly. A short dark figure waved his arms and hurried towards the guy. "Hey," was heard from afar. "Who are you? Why are you yelling?" "Human. A living person. Village." Roma jumped to his feet and rushed forward. The tooth did not fall on the tooth. The cap remained somewhere near the well, but now it did not matter. "Help! Help us!" The voice sounded hoarse. He ran into the old man, literally hanging on him. He grabbed the boy tightly by the shoulders. "Help, please," Roma muttered, looking into his face, as if not believing that the old man was real. The girl fell into a well. "Please, we need to call someone." The old man froze, listening to the boy's confused speeches, felt his shoulders, head, arms, and shook his head. "It's bad, really bad. My hands are completely frostbitten. Let's go quickly. I'll help you." The man pulled the guy along with him. "Stop." Roma couldn't believe it. "Didn't he hear? I told you. There's a girl who fell into a well." The old man looked with disbelief, frowning. "Which well?" "Yes, we got lost. There was a car parked near a snowdrift. That well." Roma turned around to point the bad guy to the well with his hands, but the words got stuck in his throat. "There's no well here." The old man stood next to him, scratching his beard. Before them stretched an open field framed by hills, and there is no road. And it wasn't. The old man continued. "There is only one road, and it's on the other side." The guy looked ahead blankly. No car with my father. No well. There was nothing. There was no one. Just snow-covered space, quiet and sleepy. "Let's go before my last brain freezes." The old man insistently pulled the guy along. He didn't resist now. He just muttered under his breath. There was a well, and a dead child." "Where is he? Are you talking about a child?" The old man said sadly. "There was such a story. An old one, really. About 50 years ago a child was drowned here. But the house was demolished, and everything was razed to the ground. There's nothing more here." The old man pulled Roma along with him, not allowing him to return. They left the field, towards the warm light of the windows. Night fell over the surrounding area. The light from the outermost houses of the village touched only the very edge of the field. The wind was still carrying snatches of retreating voices when a female figure slowly rose from under the snow and looked after those leaving with empty eyes. Her head was turned back, and her sheepskin coat with a hood hung askew on her shoulders. Gleb, Roma's father, dreamed of night and blizzard. Winter hunting. I had to take cover in a cave to avoid being swept to death. Give me some flint. The brother's hoarse voice was heard from the dark depths. Now let's try to figure out a fire here. Gleb grinned, throwing off his backpack, and tied it, pulled out a long key-like lighter by the strap, and looked into the darkness. I don't see you, Kostian. Take it. Gleb kept waiting for his brother to extend his hand, but he did not respond. The man wanted to colligate, but at that moment the cave was filled with a heart-rending scream similar to a roar. Gleb woke up, sweating and breathing heavily. He was sitting in a cold car. It was dusk outside, and a shadow hung near his door. Knock, knock, knock. A shadow knocked on the window. The man jerked awake, but found himself wearing a seatbelt. The driver's seat is empty. Behind too. What the heck? There was another knock on the window. Because it was getting dark, it was unclear who was there. Yes, now, Gleb said dissatisfiedly, pulling off his belt. What is it? The man opened the door and was stunned. His brother was standing in front of him, alive, whole, in his father's sheepskin coat and with a gun over his shoulder. Gleb stared at him and even reached out his hand to touch him. His hand rested on the fur lapel of his sheepskin coat. Your mother, Kostian. The man got out of the car, grabbing his brother's shoulders and patting them. How so? Like this? Are you alive? Kostya looked detached. His hat slipped slightly to one side. Gleb joyfully looked around in search of his own. He saw a field, a well, and a gloomy darkening sky above the forest. Where is Romka? Yanka, Kostian, say something already. Gleb did not let up. Finally, the brother raised his hand and took the man by the elbow. Come with me. We have to leave, Kostya said hoarsely, and then moved along the snow-covered road away from the well, in the direction from which the car had come. They had almost reached the turn when the brother spoke again. There once was a house here. The old people told me when my wife and I moved here. Their family lived with a small child, and there was an old man with them. This old man, they say, is from an evil spirit. New by force. Well, from this field, snakes or some kind of vile will crawl into the village. Gleb looked around. The car was still standing with its nose in a snowdrift. The well was dark against a background of a white plain, and Kostya continued. Then the old devil went crazy. He kept saying that the child had been possessed by a demon. He drowned the child in a well and burned down the house along with the whole family. For some time nothing happened, and then they started finding dead animals near the ruins. Hunters stopped walking from this field altogether. Then we heard screams, children crying, and then people began to disappear. Then they called the priest, raised everything to the ground, filled up the well and sealed it. Wow, Gleb shook his head. This time I went hunting, drank too much and got lost. I remember hearing someone calling me, and I woke up in a dim clearing. My hands were bloody. The well lid was broken. I did it, released him. Ghost of a child. And now he's luring victims here. Gleb stopped dumbfounded and looked at his brother. And now what I can do? Kostya looked gloomily and sighed. First, let's go to the road, otherwise we won't be able to do it later. While he is full and does not look. This is a damn place you go in, and you won't come out. Stop. Gleb grabbed Kostya's sleeve. What about Romka? Yanka. Romka is alive. He answered. Let's go. We'll come up with something. Two silhouettes walked side by side, moving away through the evening, frozen in the twilight. The wind was silent, and only a contented rumbling murmur could be heard in the black depths of the well.